Welcome to Coffee and Community Cutaneous Lymphoma Conversations, brought to you by the Cutaneous Lymphoma Foundation. I'm today's host, Holly Preeb, and I'm glad to have you with us. Joining me today is Rich, a member of the cutaneous lymphoma community, here to share his journey with the hopes of supporting the next person diagnosed with this rare disease. So grab your favorite cup of coffee, settle in, as Rich and I discuss his journey with cutaneous lymphoma. Welcome, Rich. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Holly. Good to be here.
I'm so grateful. It's always so nice to have a member of the community join us and share their experiences. So let's start there. Maybe share your diagnosis and your journey. Let's just get the audience up to speed with who you are.
Sure. My journey's been in many ways a long one because it begins with my father who had melanoma. And because of that diagnosis, I've been seeing dermatologists almost my entire adult life. And every 6 months go in and have a body review. And probably about 3 years ago, I started getting eczema and I've got a really terrific dermatologist, and she was treating it as eczema. There were some areas she was concerned about, and took an initial biopsy. She called me at home late one afternoon after the biopsy results came in, which I find extraordinary. So I love her for that. But she made a point of saying to me that the results that came back almost entirely point to this being eczema. But she says, I got to tell you that there's a tiny possibility that it could be something else. It could be a form of lymphoma. Now, I've talked to the other dermatologists in our department, and we're of the opinion that this is eczema, and so we're going to go ahead and treat it like that. Well, that was like 2.5 years ago, and she gave me that piece of information. I remember that she said it might be something else, but we
Mhm.
did probably 2 more biopsies in the ensuing 2 years, which all came back equivocal, but still pointed towards eczema. And I went on Rinvoq and everything started clearing up. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like just my skin just cleared up. And I came into an office visit with my dermatologist, and I said, I've got to thank you. This is the first time I've had a t-shirt on in 2 years. I can
Wow.
finally feel comfortable enough to show to expose my arms. And about a month later, it's like I fell off a cliff. And the Rinvoq just stopped having any effect at all. Most of my presentation was on my arms and legs. She took me off the Rinvoq because it clearly wasn't helping. And she said, there was what turned out to be a plaque on my right thigh. And she says, I think we want to biopsy that. And that's the one that came back positive for cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. Um, I retired from my business career on January the 1st this year. This
Well,
year.
congratulations.
Well, thank you. And 5 weeks later, I got a cancer diagnosis.
Oh,
And it's like the universe is messing with me. And that's been part of one of the hardest parts of this journey is what goes on between your ears. And that just kind of hangs with me. And it annoys me. I turned 74 in February. My wife and I have plans, and this really put a damper on things.
I'm sorry.
I was fortunate that a team was coalescing around me, starting with my dermatologist, who is a specialist in CTCL. She's a dermopathologist, which really helps. She can read the slides herself. They have a dedicated CTCL team,
Mhm.
which the two of them serve on, two dermatologists, a hematology oncologist, and a hemonc PA. And so, they're looking at all of the folks who are presenting with CTCL, and I meet with them on a quarterly basis. And it's just having them as a team looking at it from different perspectives and saying, here's what we recommend and here's why. And, when I have my meetings, I'm sitting there in my hospital acquired gowns so they can take a look at everything. And, it's a teaching hospital. And so they're sitting there talking about me while I'm just sitting there going, okay, I'm listening to all this. But I can understand a lot of the give and take. And then they say, well, Here's what we recommend and what we
Yeah.
ought to do going forward. So, we initially started with bexarotene, which has a known side effect of messing with your lipids. My triglycerides went to over 600 in 3 weeks, where one below 150 is normal. So I got off of that real quick and switched me to acitretin. I started phototherapy almost immediately.
Right.
So I'm going in and doing phototherapy twice a week. I will probably be on that the rest of my life. They haven't quite said that, but it does such a good job at kind of beating things down and maintaining the clinical control that they're looking to achieve. One of the things that I learned very quickly was um, we no longer talk about being in remission. And I brought it up at a CTCL team meeting, and I said, "So am I in remission now?" And they go, I could see all four of them looked at each other like, "Who's going to answer this one?" And finally, the hematologist oncologist said, "Well, Rich, here's the thing: there are some forms of cancer where we can truly say this is in remission. That's not the case with cutaneous T cell lymphoma. What we are trying to do, as you know, it's a chronic disease. We don't know how to cure it, but we're doing everything we can to control it. So what we are doing is seeking to gain clinical control over your disease, whether it's phototherapy or medications or radiation therapy. Whatever you're doing, it's all designed to keep everything under control." So, it's hearing that really shifted my whole perspective because I was thinking, "Oh, gee, I might be in remission now."
Right. Looking for the finish line.
Looking for the finish line. Well, I always knew this was an incurable disease, so I knew it wouldn't be gone. But
Okay.
I had the impression that you could go into remission and it could be 3 years, 6 years, and asymptomatic. And no, not likely. Possible, but not likely. And so it's getting my head in a space that says you got to be realistic about what you're dealing with and make sure that you're on the same wavelength as your physician team so that we're all talking the same thing. As I continue to say to them, you've got to help me manage expectations. So if
Right.
I'm thinking one thing and you're going, no, that's not quite right, like the discussion around remission versus clinical control, I need you to correct me and make sure that we're talking the same language. So that's something we've gotten pretty clear. They're understanding that that's what I want. I have the advantage that I've been around healthcare almost my entire life. My father was a physician. I was a hospital administrator for 20 years. And while I left that 30 years ago, I became an executive coach and ran my own business, but I coached a lot of healthcare executives. And so I've got a kind of an insider's knowledge of the healthcare system. So I'm an unusual patient in that regard. It's almost as bad as having a physician as your patient, you know? So, uh, but so that's where we are. I've been through the team recommended, and I concur to do total body radiation therapy. And Medical University of South Carolina is the only place in South Carolina that has that ability to do that. I am truly blessed to live in this area, that I didn't have to travel hours and hours and hours to get there. It was 6 treatments over 2 weeks and made an enormous difference. So I've had some spot therapy since then to get a few stubborn patches on my left arm. So I'm back now on phototherapy twice a week. On
Yeah,
we go.
you've really touched on several therapies and treatment options. So, want to back up to a couple of things that we talked or that you
Sure.
had mentioned. First, retirement in January, and you said a few weeks. So, diagnosis in February.
Yeah, it was 5 weeks later.
So you're pretty newly diagnosed, even though you've had some
Yes.
symptoms that it sounds like go back potentially 3 years. But
Right.
and what was the stage?
Yeah, it's stage 2B.
Okay.
So, as I discovered, the difference between 2A and 2B is that 2B is probably a little more advanced. And I think that's one of the reasons that my team has been very aggressive about the treatment options and getting me into radiation therapy sooner rather than later. And I'm all for that. I want to deal with this and get it under control, get on with all the things I had dreamed about doing in retirement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you talk about so some of the treatments like what that experience is like. I mean, light therapy is, you said 2 times a week, so that's going in and going into a booth, radiate talk me
Right.
through the impact on your life since February. I mean, it sounds like you've had multiple different things that you're doing. So everyday living has changed a little bit for you since
Yeah.
February. Talk me through what it's like to get through those different types of therapies and the
Yeah.
impact those have had on you.
Well, the phototherapy was the first therapy where I had to go somewhere. It wasn't like I could get a medication from the pharmacy and take a pill in the morning or the evening. The phototherapy itself is exceedingly simple. I mean, you walk in, you strip down to your underwear and you get in the booth with these goggles on, and they put on the light, and you get, in this case, it's ultraviolet A therapy, and it's PUVA treatment. I take a medication before I go, which increases the absorption of the UVA rays. And it varies over time in terms of the duration that I'm in the booth, the time in the booth, and the strength of the waves, the light waves. So, which are going back, I think, to my high school physics, they're measured in joules of light. It was so interesting that the very first treatment, I was in the booth for exactly 19 seconds. I mean, come on. It took me longer to get undressed than it did to get the treatment. But as they explained to me, it's over time, we're going to increase your time in the booth duration, and we're going to increase the strength of the light waves, the joules. And so, and if I end up having to stop for some reason, then like with the radiation therapy, I stopped the phototherapy, and I went probably 4 or 6 weeks without any phototherapy. We went back to 0. Well, we went back to 19 seconds and started that trip all the way all over again. So I had therapy yesterday, and we were up to 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And I don't.
Still 4 minutes and 20 that could still be longer than the time it took you to get undressed and redressed, at least
Oh,
for me, it would
absolutely.
be.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's the other piece of it is, it takes me about an hour to drive from my home into the hospital, park in the parking garage, usually on the 7th or 8th level of this, multi-level deck. Then I have to walk down and go in the hospital and go in and check in. All of that just takes time. And so from the time I leave home to the time I get back is usually 2.5 hours twice a week. And doesn't sound like a lot, but it wears on you. The and I drive myself, and nobody has to drive me in. There's nothing that requires me to have my wife doesn't have to go with me to drive me home.
Sure.
So I can drive in, and probably about a month ago, I started developing some pain in my right thigh as I was driving in. And I realized that it almost exactly 20 minutes behind the wheel, I would get this sciatic pain in my right leg. Well, I kind of knew where that was coming from. I've had 5 back surgeries in my life, resulting in 2 fusions in my cervical spine, in my
Mm,
neck, and 1 at L5S1, so in my lower back. And the last surgery was 20 years ago. So there's been a lot of time for my body to deal with the presence. In the case of the lumbar fusion, I've got rods and screws. It's a very impressive X-ray. And but there's a lot of stenosis there now, and it's characterized as severe, when an MRI was taken of it back in January. And so I'm having a repeat MRI tomorrow morning because
mm.
the pain has come back, which it evolved in the process, and it really came to my awareness driving in to go to my PUVA treatments.
Yeah,
It's this is one of those things where another aspect of my medical history is now intersecting with my CTCL treatments.
right.
And, the other piece of this is that not only was I getting leg pain, about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I woke up one morning and my shoulders, I had joint pain in my shoulders, in my hands and wrists, a little bit in the lower extremities, but particularly the upper extremities. And at first, I could not close my fingers into a fist. I would have to just kind of wiggle them, and they would loosen up within a few minutes. And I did a course of prednisone uh, to knock down the inflammation, which was great for it's a 6 day dose pack. It was great for 6.5 days, and after that, the pain came back. So I have difficulty rolling over in bed, for example, because I've got back issues to deal with. My shoulders and wrists are not strong because, and I've got to kind of leverage my body so I can swing my feet out and swing my torso up so I can get out of bed. Um, and all of that's just kind of come on me in the midst of all this, my treatment for CTCL. And it's like, come on, universe, leave me alone. you know,
Right. It
I need
becomes a
some time
lot.
off here. It is a lot. We're my wife and I are uh, we are celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary in December,
Congratulations.
and
That's a
thank
huge
you.
milestone.
We are planning a we are flying from Charleston to Toronto. We're meeting up with a former client of mine who lives in Toronto, has helped us do some vacation planning. We're gonna be in Toronto for 3 days, and then we're taking a Trans Canadian Railroad from Toronto to Vancouver. So on the train for 96 hours,
Mhm.
and it's going to be beautiful. And then when we'll be in Vancouver for 4 days after that, and then we'll fly home. I'd be dishonest if I said I wasn't worried that we might have to cancel because of my health, but we're making plans as if we are going. And that's one of the things that has really helped me the last few weeks is doing the trip planning. And
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time on the internet looking at, oh, look at this restaurant. Ooh, look at that restaurant. We can go here, we can go there, and uh, and then reconnecting with a former client who's just a wonderful person. Um, it's helped my spirits and helped me maintain my mental health.
Yeah.
Because that's an important piece of, I think, of our journey is making
Agreed.
sure that we're taking care of what's going on between our ears.
And I would say that you bring up a really good point, right? A component of having a lifetime chronic disease that you're dealing with,
Yep.
on top of some other health challenges that you're facing, that you've had, it sounds like reoccurring problems, especially knowing that you've had to have other surgeries and plates and screws and things of that nature. You know, the importance of, and I don't know if you've talked to your treating team or not, but the importance of creating a plan for these opportunities, right? The short amount of time that you need to get away for your mental health in a lifetime chronic diagnosis, right? That you're facing this. How do you do that? Have you talked to your treatment team about your plans and making sure that you've got a plan so that that goes off without a hitch, because it sounds
Yeah.
like a magnificent trip and you
Yeah.
have to do it.
Thank you. Well, yes, we have talked to the team. It's one of the nice things about having the quarterly meetings, and my wife always goes with me. It's her. She's in this with me, and so we talk about what we want to talk to them about. And one of the things at the last meeting was we got to talk about we want to take some time off, and so we told them about the trip in December. And my dermatologist, who's really my lead physician, looked right at us and said, don't ever put your care in front of doing things that you want to do in your life. These things are important. Go do it, and you're gone for 11 or 12 days. So what's the worst that happens? You're back to 19 seconds in the Puva booth. And so she's been terrific, and she understands it's important to have time to do those kinds of things. We pressed her for a little relief from having twice a week Puva treatments. And she said, well, I'll negotiate with you. So the last 2 weeks, I've only done one treatment just to have a little more time to rest. But she's open to those things. And we're not afraid to ask the questions. And I think that's, one of the things that has helped us the most is particularly with two of us.
Yeah.
And, my wife and I are always, like I said, we talk before we have every meeting with one of the physicians, and then we talk about what we want to ask them. And, I always think I'll remember, but, I often don't, but she does. My wife does. And so we make sure we get things covered with them.
But it's so important. I mean, it's important to not be afraid to ask those questions either and
Mm,
have a good open relationship with your treating team.
yeah,
You know, it will take a long mental toll on you if you don't take those times to live your life. So,
absolutely. Well, and
kudos to
I
you.
learned a long time ago that you rarely get what you don't ask for. So, Doc, I need some time off because it's my 50th wedding anniversary. We're going on vacation. So,
Exactly, and this is important for other listeners to know, is that it's okay to ask the physician those questions,
absolutely.
and that living your life is really important as well because it's all part of your mental health, which is part of your overall care.
Yeah.
So, you should be proud of yourself for taking the initiative on, taking care of yourself
Oh, well,
and
thank
making
you.
sure you're celebrating that.
Yeah.
So
One of the only just real quick, one of the other things that in terms of taking care of myself, I mentioned at the top of our conversation that our daughter has multiple sclerosis, and she is a graduate student and getting a master's degree in counseling. She's in her final semester, a straight A student, very proud of her. And the first time she came home after my diagnosis, she and I were out for a walk, walking her dog, and she goes, "Dad, have you thought about getting a counselor?"
Mm,
And I said, "Yeah, I kind of thought about it." She says, "Dad, you really need to do it." And
yeah,
she helped me find a counselor who I meet with now every week. And it's a virtual meeting, which is great. I don't have to travel anywhere. But we jump on a Zoom call and we have our session, and it's terrific. So she's pushed me. My therapist, has pushed me to address some things that I kind of pushing to the side a little bit.
yeah,
And we've all got things that are uncomfortable for us that we need some help with, and that's what she does for me, along with my wife, who's also not afraid to push me to address some things that are good for my mental health. So
yeah. Talk to me about, I know we chatted a little bit before we, started talking in our podcast environment here about creating a support environment for yourself and developing that and having the courage to ask for help and let people into your journey. Share a little bit with our audience about how you've created that system for yourself and the importance of that from your perspective.
yeah, it has been one of the most important things I think I've done for myself. I work from home for 29 years. And so I was used to the home environment long before COVID came along. And I did most of my work on the phone until COVID came and we had Zoom to allow us to do video conferencing. But, it's easy to get kind of with once you get a diagnosis like this is so life changing to kind of just withdraw. I mean, everything I need is here at home because my office is here and the house, of course, and I was withdrawing, and that's my daughter recognized that, and I knew it, and it's kind of like one of those things, like you ought to be doing something about this,
Mhm.
but I'm not quite yet, and you kind of talk yourself out of doing what you need to do. I was delighted to find the foundation support group. It's been a great help, and terrific people who are on there and going through the same similar journeys that I'm going through. And we've talked in our group about the importance of getting uh, emotional support with a therapist, but also being able to talk to other people, like in a support group. And also, I think, and this is a gross exaggeration, but there's probably a grain of truth in it. I think it's harder for men to develop a real strong circle of friends than it is for women. I mean, I see my wife and all of her friends, but she works hard at maintaining those friendships.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, I didn't. And so I've really made an effort to reach out to. I got a group of guys. We go out for coffee every now and then, at least once a month. And and I'm making an effort uh, to reach out to people who I don't see, former colleagues. I mean, I was driving in to go to my phototherapy treatment yesterday, and I said, "Well, who haven't I talked to recently?" So I called. One person was not available, and I called the second person who I've known my entire life. We grew up in the same town. We were first year classmates in college, graduated together. We were in each other's weddings. I mean, and
Yeah.
and I talked to him. He's a physician, retired neonatologist, which didn't help me a lot. But his daughter is a physician doing research in CAR T development, and so she's in the middle of a lot of cancer research. And so I was able to, and I didn't know that when I just called my friend Spencer because I knew he was a doctor and he'd have a perspective that other friends didn't have. And all of a sudden he's talking to his daughter and getting more information. And you never know what's going to happen until you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
And so now it's, I just called him just because I wanted to talk to him. And he said, "Well, Rich, Linda and I are here at Dulles leaving for the Galapagos Islands." And I said, "Okay, well, we'll keep this conversation short, but have a great trip and say hey to the turtles for me." But it's just those moments are just there. Again, they're those little things in life that you learn to appreciate. I
Agreed.
am blessed to live on a barrier island off of South Carolina where we have lots of live oak trees and Spanish moss, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And I found myself driving down through the island one day going, "Oh my goodness, Rich, you got to stop and smell the roses here, Remember where you live. This is beautiful." And I was we live here. My wife is a native South Carolinian,
Okay.
so she has come home. She says there are only two ways you're going to get me out of here, and that is either the hurricane's going to blow our house away, or I'm going out in a box. And so we're not leaving. But it's we were fortunate. This we live in my parents' retirement home. And when my
Nice.
mom passed away, my sisters and I inherited the house. They weren't interested. I ended up with the house, and we were just so blessed to be in a beautiful place. And I couldn't believe when I had that kind of moment of realization of remembering these small things, like the natural beauty of where I live, and the fact that most people don't have what I've got, and stop and appreciate that. We've all got them some way, shape, or form, and it's important to help maintain perspective because it's too easy. My opinion, it's too easy to get lost in your diagnosis and frankly feeling sorry for yourself. You can stop feeling sorry for yourself by getting involved in doing things like little things like having coffee with the guys or appreciating the natural beauty of where you are or volunteering. I'm back doing my volunteer work, which I plan to do as part of my retirement.
That's great.
No, I can't do as much because I'm tired. I fight fatigue like a lot of my fellow CTCL patients do. But, it's like, okay, you got to build a nap into your life. That becomes now part of the pace of the day is 2 o'clock. I can't answer one more email. I'm
Yep.
going
I'm
to
all
go lie
done.
down. Yeah. So, you know,
So you kind of are starting to roll into what I would have naturally and probably most organically had come up anyways, which is what advice do you give the next person, right? The newly diagnosed
yeah.
person who's coming in and maybe shows up on the foundation's doorsteps or at the networking group where you are, and they don't know anything except for that they're new here with a new diagnosis. What's that advice?
Well, I think it's the advice is that you're not alone and don't be afraid to ask for help. Um, some people love support groups like me. I think they're great. Other people don't like them because it reminds them sometimes of when they see other people in the group whose disease process has progressed further than theirs and they go, "That's my future. I don't want to see that." I
Mm.
understand that. And, okay, so that isn't an option for you, but there are other resources. So the foundation is there. I mean, the information that I've gotten from the foundation has just been phenomenal. It's helped me learn what I needed to learn about the disease, and that was important for me early on. I was probably spending too much time on the internet as far as my doctors were concerned, but I wanted to understand the nature of this disease, and but it was also that's why I called my friend Spencer and I said, "What do you know about this?"
Right.
And so, but he helped me learn more about it, but it was all because I asked a question because as you say, we show up with a new disease. We're scared. We're worried about our lives, the impact on our families, and it's if you don't get the kind of support you need, you're gonna withdraw and go inside, and that's where things get deep and dark. I think is when we just retreat from the world. Our lives go on, and we can. It's not the life that we thought we were going to have, but it is our life. Okay, so gee, I thought I was going to Holland, but apparently not. I'm going here, and here is where the path that I'm on. It's a path that is well trodden, even though it's a rare disease, and there are people out there who we can connect with, and there are organizations like the foundation that can help us. And there are plenty of people. I mean, I none of my friends have said, "Gee, Rich, that's tough. Don't call me." They say exactly the opposite. If there's anything I can do, and you know, I I finally sucked it up here recently and did that and called a friend because I had uh, a situation where I couldn't physically do something. And so I called my friend Christopher and I said, Christopher, I'm going to take you up on your offer. And he says, what time do you want me there?
Mhm.
It's like, oh man, he's a great guy. But he meant it when he said, if you need anything, you call me.
Exactly.
And believe it when people say that. So,
Exactly. I think that's great and great sound advice for the next person is to, stay engaged. It may be difficult, look for help, and don't be afraid of being vulnerable to seek out the
yep,
help you need for sure.
absolutely.
For sure. So, what am I missing, Rich? Is there something that you know you think is really important that the audience know about your journey, about your experience, about your future? Something that's important for them to know that I may have missed in our conversation.
Well, I don't we've touched on so many good things, and there are the thing that's popping to mind as you're saying that is that, find things in your life outside of thinking about your disease specifically, that you can do something about. And, you know, I I have an incurable disease. I know that. But guess what? There are plenty of things I can do to have an impact on a life that will support people who have illnesses, whether it's cutaneous T-cell lymphoma or multiple sclerosis or, pick your disease. One of the things that I do is I'm very involved with advocacy work. And so I spend time talking to legislators and writing to them, which can feel a bit like a fool's errand at times. But, I mean, as we are sitting here today, Congress is very close to fully funding the National Institutes of Health. And hopefully that we'll see that through. But I can't tell you how many times I've communicated to my legislators about the importance of that. And so it doesn't directly impact my disease in the sense of it's going to help me personally, but it does impact the ability of organizations like the National Institutes of Health to focus research on not only, all forms of cancer. But, I've got a rare cancer. And so it's kind of an orphan in the research world. But the more resources we can get into that, I mean, it's you know that's where the advancements come from. So that advocacy work is an example of what else you can do with your time and your effort. Because I promise you, if you call a legislator at the state or local level and say, "Look, I've got cancer, and the the we have got to fund the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute. We cannot lose the valuable research that's coming out. This is one of the great success stories of our system is what's happened there. And one of the ways I've been taught to do advocacy is wow, how now? The wow is I have cancer, and here's what it means having what I've got.
Yeah.
So you try and reach them emotionally. Let's say, well, how you can help is this, and then the now is the ask that you make to vote in favor of this legislation, for example.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as scary as people think. Talking to these
Mm-mm.
legislators and their staff members, they're usually very cordial, and it's just another example of doing something that is of meaning to you that will have an impact not only on your life but the life of others.
Exactly. Exactly. You can't it when the time is right in your journey, those opportunities
Yep.
present themselves for you to be able to engage and give back to the next person as well.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
great sound advice. I love it. Anything else, Rich? Anything else that's burning or on your mind that you think is important that we share?
No, I think we've covered a lot of territory.
I think we did as well. And I'm so grateful for you coming and joining me in this conversation and sharing a little bit more about your journey and your experience with cutaneous lymphoma. So that brings us to the end of this episode of Coffee and Community Cutaneous Lymphoma Conversation. Before we go, I'd like to once again thank Rich for his time and commitment to the community, as well as thank our sponsors and donors. Without their support, programs like these would not be possible. Remember to find more episodes on your favorite podcast channel. Your feedback will help us reach more listeners and continue to bring valuable conversations to and from the cutaneous lymphoma community. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay informed, stay connected, and take care.